Hello and welcome to PM Personality Profile. My name is Nana Nsakwa IV. You know it, Chief of the only republic within the Republic, Edumasa. And here I am sitting in a very, very wonderful place, living my dream, if I may say. And I would say if this was an official setting, I would have to literally recluse myself because I'll be so biased. Here I am sitting in a very exquisite, it could pass for a 4-star hotel. But guess what? It's a TVET school. Yes, a TVET school. You see, I believe in skills training, and I believe that most people should be encouraged to have a skill because that's where the jobs are. And if the future is going to be any meaningful for the next generation, they must be armed with a skill or two. However, anytime you talk about vocational training, you go into the school and it's make do, a couple of shirts here and there, and a hammer and a saw. And so even children or even students embarking on this course think they've been glossed over, but not in DTI. Not in DTI. And I think Constance Swaniker has raised the bar and has set the mark, and others should definitely come up to standard. The game is on, if I may say. The game is on. And by the end of this interview, you would understand exactly where I'm coming from. Well, for a few of you who didn't understand why I was pushing for skills training for children. Even if you want to be a lawyer, I'm saying before you become a lawyer, learn how to sew. Because you get to university and people are so destitute. You get calls and calls and calls from people who just need stipends to get along with. And if these people had a skill, could mend, bend, sew, weld something, I bet you they would be free. You know what? I'm here in DTI, and when I come back, I'm talking to Constance Swaniker. And that alone is a whole thing, because you would assume that for, be run by a man. No, it's run by an absolutely beautiful woman. Don't go away, we are coming. Well, thank you very much for staying, and this is going to be one fantastic conversation. And don't go away, particularly if you have your children around, get them, because they need to hear what's going on here. Constance, let me say thank you so much, because it's only been a few days that you launched this place. It was a magnificent launch, very high profile, so I know you are completely worn out. Mm-hmm. And there's me pushing, that granted me my interview, so I want to say thank you so much. On the day of the lunch, I was here, but I didn't get a chance to look around. So my wow factor, literally came today. Well done.
Thank you.
Yeah, Ayuko. This just blown my mind. Even though I've been pushing for skills education, I didn't think, I imagined it up to this level. This is... Growing up, as a little girl, did you think that one day I'm going to own psychedelic TVET school?
I always say that DTI is as a result of the way I was raised. Mm-hmm. Some of the challenges that I went through as I was schooling, being very different and being more gifted and talented amongst my siblings and my peers. And having worked in industry for the last 25 years, this was something that I realized that, you get to a stage in your life when you want to give back. And as I worked more and more with young people who were interning in my factory, I realized that the school system had failed young people, just as it had failed me many years ago. It still hadn't changed, especially at a critical stage in which, when you find yourself as a young person, what sort of skill sets, is industry looking for? More and more and more as we face how technology is quickly easing out traditional jobs, so the need to look at the skill sector has to be critically looked at. And so that inspired me to birth DTI, in the hope that educators would see this as the launch pad to quickly disrupt the education sector.
Now, growing up, back then, see, there's not enough room for creatives. It's very academic. So those who can spell, calculate, and add up are always, the bright stars. If you could create or innovate, I mean, there wasn't enough room. How did you cope then, growing up? Because I can tell from that they are wild with imaginations.
I think as creative people, we internalize a lot. And it's only when you express yourself through your work that people begin to see what goes on in your thought process. And so, you're working and living at a time when creatives were not celebrated. And when I certainly graduated from KNUST 20 years ago, we were branded those crazy artists. That's all they do, sit under trees, to get grades. Whilst we are going off to social sciences and we're going to do law, look at them. So we were not taken seriously. But if you look around you, everything around you is design. From the clothes we wear to, even the car you drive, it's all design. But I guess, the way it was perceived and the way it was branded, I guess people just didn't understand, especially in Africa. When you go to the West, we travel, and the first thing we want to do is to visit a museum, to look at art. And you're thinking people pay so much money in the lineup to go to a museum. We love working through their nice parks. We admire everything that they've done hundreds of years before us. And if you think that civilization actually started in Africa, if you look at some of our art and the best of architecture, it all birthed here. So where did we go wrong? Somewhere along the school system, which is quite worrying. And so having come through that school system and looking at the trend at which the world was going, I felt a certain urgency to do this. And so this is pretty much a manifestation of what I almost have been, would I say, tasked to do.
Now, obviously being a woman, it's not traditional woman thing, is it? To be carving and welding and mending. Has that come with any challenges, or people thinking, why would you go into this sector?
Surprisingly, I've always been a tomboy at heart. I think I'm in touch more with my masculine side more than my feminine side, which is okay, because I think that for human beings have both feminine and masculine sides, but I've always been in touch with that. So I've always loved being amongst the first with my male colleagues or male peers. So for my sixth form, I went to a boys' school, Accra Academy, which was like 90% boys. So sixth form, we're only about 10% girls. I was in the school cadets. I was in everything. Everywhere you don't find girls, I'm there. And I always found it very challenging to always beat them at their game. And the thing about women, we pay attention to detail. So when you find yourself in a space where it's very male-dominated, it's very easy to excel. So it wasn't surprising that when I went to university, I also chose a sector that there were not many girls, which was, I did sculpture, which is like very physically challenging. So I've always just risen up to the challenge of, being proven or being told you can't do this. Who says you can't do that? How dare society tell us we can't do this? Why not? So, yeah, I guess that's just me.
Well, you've proven it. You've definitely proven it. So from tech, what did you go to next?
So when I was in university, I used to work in a carpentry workshop. So every holiday I'd go back. Again, all men. And I guess I was just very annoyed at being tagged, you can only wear dresses. Who says you can't wear this, you can't do that? So I've always challenged the status quo. So I worked in the carpentry workshop, and every holiday, after school ended out, the holidays ended, I'll go back to school. I mean, do things even challenging what our lecturers would tell us to do. So I guess I've always been a rebel at heart. Yeah. So that was university for me, and then entering a sector again, which was also very male-dominated, which is the metal fabrication space.
Wow.
But because, as I said, women have an eye for detail, ordinarily you see things to very minute details. So if you look at my work is very different from what my male colleagues would be doing, or what traditional artisans would be doing. So I use a lot of plants, I use nature, everything is nature inspired, and I come in with it from a very different perspective. And I always say that, and I throw this out to men out there, that that women must have a voice at the table. Because when we're given the opportunity to also voice out, we come in with different, from a different perspective. And so, my big dream that I'd like to see more girls wearing overalls and, working in spaces that, we shouldn't say that, oh, we're giving girls opportunity to enter male. No, it's your right. Go out and claim it. So those conversations, that's like the Beijing conference, that's how many years ago, times have changed. Right now, when you go to school and it's open day or speech day, 70% of the prize is actually going to girls.
Yeah.
So times have changed.
Yeah.
Times have really changed, yeah.
So on holiday, so in uni, on holidays, you're working in a carpentry shop.
Yeah.
So you come in your overalls and...
Yes.
What did they do in the shop? Was it like a furniture shop? Or?
It was a furniture shop, yeah. So my job was to sand down using sandpaper. Eventually then I moved to designing, and I just moved around. And that gave me the opportunity to, to learn how to do everything. So when I started my own company and I give orders out to my artisans, I can do everything. So if the leg is not straight and I take the level, when I stand back, I have an eagle eye and I tell you that don't challenge me because it's not straight. Or if it's not well polished, So I guess, the fact that I knew how to do these things hands-on, commanded their respect. The fact that we're all peers, and I think it's very important that when you're learning a trade, you better hone your talent and you must perfect your talent. And talent comes by practice and experience. If you look at footballers, you have to train, you have to practice. Or a musician, if you don't practice, it's taken away from you. So you have to constantly. You never become a master craftsman after doing 2 years of apprenticeship. What makes a master craftsman? So that's the thing about talent. You don't give yourself a pat on the back and say, I've achieved. No. The greatest artists were celebrated way after they died. And so that's the thing about creativity. You constantly are building up on it.
So you do metal, you do wood, do you do clay as well?
My favorite medium is metal. So but I experiment with other mediums to complement what we do, but my love is really in metal fabrication. It's actually very easy to use because metal is more malleable than wood. Wood is very static, but with metal you can beat it. You can, once you put it in the fire, you can mold it. You can do so much more with it. And so when I discovered how easy it was to work with metal, I took that and I run with it.
Wow. I mean, I know you're internationally acclaimed, and have you done shows outside, or you have done shows outside?
Yes. So when I'm not doing, hardcore fabrication, I'm actually an artist at heart. So I've done quite a number of international exhibitions. I think my most famous for me and most fulfilling one when I exhibited on International Women's Day in Paris at UNESCO, representing Africa. So that was a great highlight. I've done shows in Germany and in Lagos, locally here. And my work has gone quite far.
Yeah.
But more and more, I'm pulled in different directions now. Now I've moved into education. I'd like to, in a few years' time, when I retire, is to go back to my first love, which is just being a full-time practicing artist. But that's the thing about being an artist, really. We're tagged crazy because we're quite restless, because you're always looking at the next thing to do.
Are you raising the bar too far? Are we catching up enough? Do you think we are catching up enough, the Ghanaian market understanding what you're doing, or you're just going, when we come, we come?
I think I'm very much aware that I'm probably maybe 10, 15 years, maybe even 20 years ahead of everybody else, because I was there 20 years back. Remember when I was telling you that I entered a space when there was no creative economy? I basically graduated from university when there were no jobs for artists. So by default, I started my own company doing what I knew. So I'm very much aware as well that I've entered a sector that is also way ahead of my peers. But when I started off set out to start DTI, I traveled extensively around Europe and in the US. And I went to top design schools. Some of them were as 100 years, 150 years old, and very established design schools. And I asked myself that, why can't we do this in Africa? Especially at a time when, for a young person, those skill sets which would propel our growth require so much creativity. And so I knew that the standard had to be really high. And so, yeah, we're very much aware of the backlash, but I'm very happy to announce that when we did the launch, I think it was such a manifestation of that the timing was right, that everybody that came in here was wowed by what they saw, which was a good sign that change has come. But my only worry is for public sector and policy, that private sector is always miles ahead, that the conversations must now merge, where we are looking for change. When we take the lead, public sector should also be walking parallel along with us. And so that's my biggest worry, that I hope that this would, because if you look at what Patrick Ewa did with Aseshi, it took him so long to get his presidential charter. I mean, I'm hoping that with what they've done, they've proven that really there's a case for disruption in education. And so what we're also looking to do at DTI is to disrupt the TVET sector. And so if they've carved and opened the way for us, we shouldn't have to struggle as much as they did.
Have you gone to a reception or gone to an office and say, what do you do? And you say, I'm a sculptor, and they will laugh, thinking, look at what she say. look at your pretty girl, how can you sculpt?
I think the first thing is when you're traveling and the immigration guy looks at your passport and he's flipping occupation, sculptor. First of all, what is that? Then you have to explain, or maybe, okay, old passport, artist. What do you do? Are you a musician? Are you this? Are you that? And then you tell them you're a sculptor, and they're looking at you like, what is that? Or the first thing people do is like, oh, let me look at your hands. So let's, and it doesn't really bother me.
Of course.
But I make it a strong presence, that when you appear in a space that you appear almost very feminine and don't make excuses for being the gender that you are. And this is to women who work in male-dominated trades. And sometimes women are tagged, man, woman, she's so hard, she's so this, when you're perceived tough. Don't dim your femininity for anything. It's very important that you appear and come as you are, displaying your feminine leadership, because there's also power in femininity. We are not male. Men are men, women are women, Of course, there's a lot of talk about gender now, but I'm a woman. This is who I am. I'm not going to change that for anything. So there's no need to prove anything. Just let your work speak for itself, you know. So usually I'm very understated. I'm very ladylike, and you know, this is who I am. And I think it's pleasantly surprising when they see that, oh wow, we never thought, you know, that, and that's when the respect you're looking for comes through. There's no need to prove anything.
Well, so all the young ladies out there listening, there's no competition, there's no proof. Be yourself, but let your work speak for itself.
Being your authentic self.
Yeah.
You know, it's very important that we have to learn to be our authentic selves. Yeah.
That's wonderful. I'm going to take a break here, and then when I come back, the conversation continues. Don't go. Well, thank you very much for staying, and we are talking to Constance Swaniker, whose work is definitely speaking for itself. She probably didn't do any interview, just go around, take shots, and go home, say, I told you so. But I mean, when I was growing up, I had dyslexia, so I was also not very academic. I'm trying to imagine pitching you against your other siblings who probably were more academic. I mean, at the time, I mean, when they say, look at you, you're not doing your work, and he's doing his work.
Yeah.
Did you go through that?
Yeah, I mean, my mother is a teacher. She actually owns a school in Botswana, and she expected very high standards from us. So my siblings were straight A's, math and science, and I struggled to even make a D in math, you know. You know, eventually I wrote, I think my O-level math twice, and I got a C. And my mother was like, thank God it's a C, you know, because to get into university, at least you needed a pass. So just making that pass, you know. But, you know, there's something I always say, that, you know, when they say that when your one arm is cut off, the other hand is strengthened. So when you lack something, you're usually very strong in something. And so where I lacked, I also was, you know, given my, you know, talent. So I guess it was my mother who discovered that whilst I struggled to catch up with the others, you know, she said she found a piece of art that I had done, and that's when it dawned on her that I was actually very different. So then she started buying a lot of more crayons and paper, and I was just encouraged to just...
You're lucky.
Yeah, so basically anything around I'll take and I'll be sketching, and you know, so she kind of like steered me through school. So for O-levels, I did more reading subjects. I loved geography, I loved biology, because it was, you know, you had to draw the plants and label it, so I'd always get a lot of marks, because I always had the best, you know. Or for geography, you draw volcanoes, and so I got a lot of marks for that. And so I loved those subjects. And then I did agriculture, I did home economics. So basically things that, you know, you could use your hands and touch, feel. And so that's how I passed my A-levels. I didn't do any of the traditional subjects. You know, I got a 1 for, geography first. In O-levels.
Okay.
And then I went to do A-level art, A-level geography, and government. Government I flunked, but I passed art and passed geography, and that's how I ended up in university to do art. But then nobody knew, okay, so you've done art, what next? Nobody knew. You know, we didn't have career guidance, we didn't have anything.
Wow.
You know, so, I mean, nobody knew. Educators didn't really understand kids like us. And so that's when I vowed, you know, having been in industry for 20 years, it's when I realized that there has to be a school. You know, I would have loved to have gone to a school like this.
Wow.
And then more so when you come from a middle class family like mine, who wants to send their child to a technical school? I mean, the perception, technical school. It's like, oh, you come from a middle income family, go and learn hairdressing. Go and learn. I mean, it wasn't, no prestige, nothing. And I said, no. There are so many young people in the school system who are truly struggling. Yeah. And if I tell you that a lot of them actually face a lot of psychological issues, depression issues. And so a big part of what we also do here, we work heavily with clinical psychologists. So we work on mindset.
Wow.
You know, so it's a holistic program that before change can happen, it has to come from within.
Yeah.
So a lot of the young people that we work with come from communities, very deprived communities. They're facing all sort of issues. You said you had dyslexia. We have young kids here who are flanking maths and English, but you put them in the workshop. You should see what they're doing with their hands, you know. So that's where education has failed to cater for people like that. And so we teach math here, even in a very practical manner, trade math. Very visual, very practical, because you have to have the basic understanding of math. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So here, this is a ruler, or this is a piece of metal. Use your measuring tape and then, you know, pieces of, and so they understand, because as they begin to work practically, it makes sense to them. Because if you're doing a chair, you have to catch each leg to be 18 inches. So 18 inches times 4. That gives you a leg, you know. So it's interesting. We're working with, you know, consultants to design our own curriculum. So a lot of what we also do here, even though we are accredited by CODVET and we're using the national curriculum, a lot of the curriculum also, which we call the DTI enrichment program, is a result of my own life and my own experience in industry. And I always say that the curriculum should be industry-driven as well, you know, because you're training young people for industry. Industry is never at the table. It doesn't make sense, you know. So it's an infusion of everything that I've picked up along the way, and it's uniquely a DTI model, you know.
I mean, do your students appreciate what you're getting here?
Oh, yes. By all means. I'm sure you saw from the launch that there was a big display of culture and a lot of traditional leaders. So we work heavily in the communities. And so we have what we call our community liaison officers and community navigators. From Akwamufie, we have 4 students here. Yeah. From Jamestown, we have 4. 1/3 of our student body is Islam. So you also saw the chief imam here. And that's where those troubled kids are, you know, young people who are looking for opportunity. And I always say that as well, that we sit on a ticking time bomb. Youth unemployment levels are very high. Young people don't have skills, and they don't have the skills that industry is looking for. So it's not that jobs don't exist. Jobs exist, but the skill set that industry is looking for is what is missing. So are we training for the job market? You know, it should be demand driven. And so what we're giving them when we work in the communities is through the navigators and the liaison officers that we work with, identify those kids and bring them to us. You know, it's almost like the, you know, when you go to New York, you know, bring me your, I can't even remember what it is, but just bring us all those kids, you know. We would rehabilitate them and would hand them over to you. So eventually this is where industry would be coming to pick up talent. Not everybody will be an entrepreneur. Not everybody would, you know, but we're saying that as we train, it's very easy to identify those who go the entrepreneurial way and those who would end up in industry. So it's, the dynamics is very different. Yeah.
Because, you know, anytime I hear, oh, we will create jobs, we will create jobs, we will create jobs, I think, what job are you going to create? And who is going to do that job? You know, story about my sister's next door neighbor who went to prison, learned carpentry, came back, and in 2 weeks' time, he put a sign on his door, help needed. 2 weeks.
Exactly.
He needed help to work. Do you think nationally we are getting the idea or the agency that skills and not clerical is where, you know, that's where the game changer is? Are we getting it?
I think the urgency at which, you know, young people are looking for jobs, or the conversations around job creation, I don't want to sound controversial here by saying that if you look at people who make policy, 60 and above. Yet you're catering or you're making policy for what we term youth, 15 to 35, UN, what we term youth, 15 to 35, right? And you're so disconnected with next generation. So I really think that they really don't see the urgency of job creation. And then we also look at the sectors where jobs would be. In Africa, which is actually agriculture. But young people certainly would not go into the farms like their grandfathers farmed. So how do you make agriculture sexy for a young person? And steer them into the directions, into those industries where those jobs would be. So for instance, the work we're doing with Cosmos, through the Cosmos Innovation Center, is making agriculture interesting for young people. So one of the teams that we helped incubate actually won $50,000 just this week. And we designed a mechanical scarecrow. So cereal farmers up north face a lot of problems with pests just around the time they need to harvest. So they looked at, coming up with a solution, an innovative solution. And so we designed this thing, and it had a solar panel to power the battery cells, and it had laser sensors to sense the presence of birds, and then it will trigger off predatory sounds, and then you see the birds flying off. So now, an innovative solution. So you can imagine, it's all fabricated parts, So for a young person to go into the skill sector, solving a problem in the agri sector, so those sort of things. If a farmer is still using a hoe as we know it, but if we're going to move into industrial farming, youth population means food security. That means that we need to start thinking mechanized. That means that we need to start producing equipment, start going into hardware production and things like that. So if you ask me, is there any real urgency? No.
But maybe you set the pace. I think maybe you set the pace, and that the news from DTI should spread out fast. Because, you see, I'm sure if there was something like this in your days, your mom wouldn't mind sending you to a place like this to learn, because it's like, what education is meant to be. Like you said, you hope that governments would catch up. We're a bit slow, but who knows? What's next for this? I mean, this is like the last stop.
Actually, this is just the beginning. Already, the campus is too small. I mean, we're on 1.5 acres. From next year, the student population is going to go up to 250. So already we're looking at expansion plans. So we're looking on the outskirts of Accra for about 50 acres of land. So what you see here is just the beginning of a bigger grand plan. And then we're also looking at scale, because it's important to add that what is happening in Ghana is not just peculiar to Ghana, but it's a continental problem. So what does scale look like as well? So we're looking at replicate this across Africa as well.
Now, let me take a break and come straight back, because it's getting more exciting. That's what I like to hear. Dream beyond your borders. Don't go, we're coming. Well, still here sat in this beautiful, lovely of DTI, indeed. I'm wowed. I told you I'm biased. If this had been any official setting, I just had to recluse myself. But I love the international idea. So set up like Nigeria, Sierra Leone, wow.
It's the African youth explosion. I mean, if we're looking at by the year 2030, our population is going to be twice the size of Asia. Yes, in Nigeria, up north, a woman is given birth up to 9, 10 kids. So We sit on a huge problem, but what does this huge population explosion mean as well? You know, so just this afternoon, we had a delegation coming in from Tanzania, looking at what best practice and how they can take back. I just returned from Kenya, a conference on, you know, so there's so many conversations going on around youth. If you look at also the migration problem, you know, look at the droves of number of young people who are looking to cross the borders. You know, so it's become not just an African problem, but it's become a global problem that if you look at what it means to have so much untapped energy, you know, instability, you know, food crisis, this, that. So when you peel the layers, it's a deeper problem. And so it means, how do you think global? You know, what does scale look like? And if you're looking at real impact, what does impact look like to you? And I think that's the thing about, you know, when you decide to do work that involves impact, look beyond the space in which you come from and think about what, you know, impact means to you. And I think that's what, when you look at what Microsoft, or if you look at Google, I mean, you look at that, you know, how do you now use technology even as the enabler to make sure that, you know, what you're trying to do reaches far.
Great. So if somebody came to DTI, they would learn, is it wood, metal, and clay?
Okay, so good question. The program here is called the Precision Fabrication Program.
Okay.
It's not tagged to anything. So it's just teaching young people how to fabricate precision. So it's the basic building blocks of learning how to build.
So whatever it is you take.
Whatever it is, yeah. So if you notice that it's the Design and Technology Institute. So if you have the opportunity to visit our digital lab, you know, teaching young people how to use the best of design software, and then giving them the basics. So we do design thinking. So what is design thinking? So for instance, the bracelet that you're wearing, I mean, there was a thought process behind this. There's a reason why this is this, this is that. And if I gave you an order and I said, design something for a chief, don't assume that you know what the chief wants. So you would have a conversation with the chief. He tells you he's looking for this, he's looking for that. Then you would come up with the concept. So then we also now move into product realization. What would the product look like in the end? What does it take to produce this? You know, so what sort of materials you would need, you know, so all the back end of everything that goes on. And then you would now go and then produce that thing. So that forms 30% of the back end of what they need to know, the softer skills, before you now go on into the workshop and then produce that. You know, I mean, even to the base that we even teach etiquette here.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Which is very much lacking.
Oh, yes.
Which is very, very much lacking. You know, and if you are going to be in any workspace, you must have.
Oh, yes. I mean, those basic soft skills, you know, so it encompasses. So like I said, the program is a very holistic one.
Wow.
So if you have the opportunity to speak to some of these kids, if I tell you they come from deprived communities in 8 weeks, 8 weeks, the confidence level, etiquette, you wouldn't even recognize that these are kids. And because we realized that the change would be so rapid, we also work with social workers, because you don't want your child to go back home. And now my child has become, you know, he thinks it's all that, you know, so you can imagine the backlash.
When they get back.
When they get back, well, you think you're in DTI now, so you're all that, you know. So we give them that extended support also in the communities, but in the hope that as they go back, they also effect change.
Effect change in there, of course. Yeah.
So I'm sure when your kids come back, you know, to Akwamu, oh, look at those DTI kids, you know. You know, yeah.
Customer could DTI.
Exactly, DTI, yeah. Exactly. But
That's nice. That's nice. But you see, because of where you pick your kids up, may I ask, you know, they may not have funding, you know. So how are they funding themselves?
And because we realize that the biggest problems come from the communities, we work closely with the traditional heads to ensure that you pick out those deserving kids, kids who are hungry for to empower themselves. So we screen very carefully. To come to DTI is very strict selection process. So this batch of students were funded by Get Fund.
Okay.
So they're all fully paid. From next year, too early to say, but we begin work with MasterCard Foundation.
Okay.
So then there's also the goodwill of a lot of the development partners. But to make the program sustainable, 50% of our students will be fee paying, and 50% of the scholarships will go to those needy but deserving young people.
Okay. Well, you definitely. But so how many can you take here?
So at full capacity, 250.
Okay.
So already from next year, we begin phase 2 of construction. And then we begin the acquisition of a 50-acre land and begin construction already on that bigger campus.
Okay. So like a DTI university.
Yes,
You
yes.
know?
A whole city.
A whole city.
A whole
of
city.
Technology and
Yes.
design. That's
And what we're looking at is to even have our own industrial park where we have about 4 or 5 big factories where when a student is done, they already have their own factories where we're producing for industry.
Okay.
So we see that also as a safe space that when you've graduated and you've come up with, your own product, that, your student journey doesn't end when you graduate. But for the next 3 years, if we had some seed capital to loan to you, to help your businesses pick up before you go out, yeah. So it is going to be its own enclave.
I know. Oh, this has been a long time coming, isn't it?
Yes.
I hope that that Ghana catches on quickly and soon as possible, because off air you said something really. I mean, the generation, you don't have a choice. You must have a skill.
Yeah.
You don't have a choice. You must have a skill.
This should be your first choice.
And then after, if you want to go and do law, whatever it is, you go and pursue it.
This should be your choice of education. And more as we face disruption. If you look at the banks now, all those tellers that we see, in the next year and a half, 2 years, would disappear. You would go and you would speak to an automated stand. When you go to the airport, you can check in, you can do whatever, so we won't need so much human capital anymore because technology is really disrupting a lot of things, traditional jobs as we know it. So we have to ask ourselves, what are those skill sets that industry now is looking for? Jobs that robots cannot do because they can't think. I mean, they're just automated and programmed. But they can't feel, they don't have empathy, they can't conceptualize creativity. So what are those skill sets that would be those skill sets that a young person should know? Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing. So how long has DTI been here?
Oh, we opened 8 weeks ago.
Okay.
So.
Really?
And already we're very busy, yes. Yeah.
Wow. And I like the idea of the greens. The whole school is green.
So there is it's a green campus. So if you notice, the reason why we use shipping containers, it's a green campus. Because we work with next generation, young people would face problems with recycling and problems with plastic waste and all that. So because we were working with next generation, we wanted the campus to be green, a green campus. So all the paving on the floor is all made from recycled plastic. Everything that you see is all recycled.
Plastic?
Yes, recycled plastic, yeah.
It looks very much like cement to me.
Yeah, it's all recycled plastic, yeah. So we're very big on recycling, sustainability, and all those words that as a young person, looking at what was perceived waste and creating useful things out of them. So those are all things that as a young next generation person, you face these problems. When you go to Agboboloshi, you see that as a gold mine. Where does innovation come in? How can I turn waste into useful product? Yeah.
Wow. And how long is the course?
It's an 18-month program,
Okay.
but it's very intensive. So they spend 12 months here and 18 months in industry doing further attachment, and then they go out. But it's actually a 36-month program, because the next 18 months then we've placed you with one of our industry partners for further work experience.
Okay, okay, okay. Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
And with the traditional area, is it, I know Akwamu is not here, but do you, how far out do you go?
Oh my. So we have students from Bolgatanga, Wa, Boku, you name it. They come from all over, from the central region, from about 6 or 7 regions. And this was just the inaugural class. You know, so like I said, 1/3 of our student population is either because they came from, so 10 of them are in residential.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. But I must say you are a great woman. To get the chief imam to come and say the opening prayer, I mean, that's not the mean feat.
We're very big on diversity, very big on inclusion. And that is very important, that when you're a young person, it doesn't matter where you're coming from. You all have one problem, which is the problem of what youth unemployment looks like, you know. So there's the need to break those barriers, you know, and there's the need to embrace. So we're very big on that. And I must say that they are our most disciplined young people.
Really?
And, oh yeah, very disciplined, extremely disciplined. And so there's beauty in diversity, you know, and that's very important for us, as I think as Africans, where sometimes our culture holds us back, you know. So I'm very big on that too, yeah.
Again, with their backgrounds, are they able to catch up? Because you seem to be, you know, talking 20 years ahead.
Oh, you should talk to them now. I said to you that they're DTI. So trust me, when you speak to those kids in just 8 weeks, and you know, young people observe. Children observe, and when you even have kids, they observe you a lot. So the minute you walk in within this environment, nobody will tell you that if you are like this, you leave that outside. The minute you walk through in here, there's a new, you know, there's some freshness you breathe. Everything about you changes. Oh yeah, in just 8 weeks.
That's, God bless you.
Thank you.
God bless you, because the standards out there is very low.
Yeah.
Standards are very low from even people who you expect.
Yeah. Should know
Basic
better.
courtesy, you know, hold the door for somebody to say thank you,
Yeah.
and, you know,
We're
unnecessary honking. So etiquette
We're
is
very
much
big on that,
needed.
yeah.
Very much needed. But how about staff? Are they on board with your dream, or you are Kwame Nkrumah running away?
No. So we're very big on what does the DTI culture, you know, so everybody must buy into the vision. Everybody must buy. If you do not buy into the vision, then this is not the place for you. And so we're very, very selective about faculty, and then also the board, you know. So what does the DTI village look like in the DTI community? And where I champion that as the visionary, you know, what does it take for buy-in? And I guess that sometimes when you're a visionary, you don't have to prove much. Just by doing, people would follow you. You know, so what makes a person follow you?
Become more relevant to them, huh? Your women students, I mean, you've been there, you know, looking at them. Are they catching up?
Oh yeah. Oh, you should see them with the boys. You should see them with the boys. Here, there's no gender. We are all DTI students.
That's all.
So don't tell me I can't touch that machine, or can you move aside? Watch me.
I see. Oh, that's just wonderful. That's just wonderful. I got a message from Anis Hafa, and he's just still blown away. And like I said, I had my opportunity to look around today, and I can now understand him. Because on the lunch, I just came in and I sat down. Now I can understand where he's coming from.
So you can take the opportunity and then do a walk around.
Yes, this is something else. So I think on the behalf of all skills training students, on behalf of the nation and education, I want to say thank you, because this revolution is needed.
Thank you.
Yeah, this revolution is needed, and whatever we can do to make it spread like wildfire, so that anybody has a technical institute anywhere, it shouldn't be just like make do, watered down, shared with pieces of board made of table. This
is the standard.
This is the standard. Could pass for a hotel. We put DTI hotel, and people will still come and lodge. Constance, thank you so much for this interview. And folks out there, I'm sure by now, if you have your kids around you, it's not a matter of choice or, all these clerical courses. I'm not discounting it, but I'm saying that the opportunities lies in your children. They must have a skill. I don't care what skill it is, but they should be doing something with their hands if they are going to face the next century. Until I come to you with another guest, I say thank you, and don't forget it will be repeated on Sunday at 2 p.m. Thank you. Thank you so much, Constance.